Welcome everyone to the House General and Housing Committee. It is still the 22nd of January, and we are about to hear H33, an act relating to expanding employee access to unpaid leave. Troy Hedrick, who is one of the representatives to introduce the bill, is going to present the bill along with Sophie Statney, our alleged counsel. And then we have two witnesses on the bill. So I think, do you know everyone in the room?
I've been slowly doing intro. I have at least gotten names of
Well, I'll tell
everybody.
you what, why don't we introduce ourselves? Let's start with you.
Ashley Bartley.
Leonard, Essex Town, Clear Essex Junction.
Joe Parsons, Orange, Caledonia.
I'm Charles. Chester Grafton, New England.
Debbie Dolphin, I represent St. Johnsbury, Kirby, and Concord.
Gail Pezzo, Chittenden 20, Colchester.
Okay.
Mary Howard, Rutland City.
And
Elizabeth Burrows, Windsor 1, Heartland, West Windsor, Windsor.
Sonia Lamont, Royal Washington.
Mark Mahaly, Alice Plainfield, Marshfield. So Troy, take it away.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Committee. Yes, my name is Troy Hedrick. I am a representative from Burlington, section up and around campus and the hospital. When I'm not here with you all, I work at UVM as a longtime staff member. And this is a topic that has been in this committee before, and it actually made its way through this committee before. So there are a lot of people in the room who have been part of that conversation. So I'm excited.
5 of us are new, 6
Yeah.
of us are returned.
Yeah. I'm excited and thankful that you're willing to consider it again. I'm going to give you just kind of the broad intent and then hand it over to Sophie, who can talk about the more legal aspects of it. There are really two intents with this. The first is to expand the scenarios that are defined as warranting of unpaid leave. So the situations that a person would be legally allowed to seek unpaid leave would expand into bereavement, into safe leave, and then into qualifying exigencies. And then the bill also, the second kind of overall intent is that it expands the definitions of who is eligible for those leaves, redefines eligible relationships and criteria to include non-traditional family structures, chosen families, and other sorts of personal bonds. And there's detail in there that you will all, I'm sure, be discussing. So very broadly, the purpose is to expand access to unpaid family and medical leave. Unpaid provides job protections for domestic violence, sexual assault, stalking, bereavement, qualifying exigencies. Those are the big kind of additions into this. It does establish also some reporting requirements to track usage that can possibly then inform where we take this if we have to take it in new directions later on. But the reporting requirements are somewhat new to this as well. I can get into some specifics. So family members would be broadened to include non-traditional relationships, chosen families, significant personal bonds that are akin to family relationships. Those are all sort of defined, or at least initially defined in the bill. Bereavement leave would include leaves for estate settlement for up to 1 year after the family member's death. Safe leave, this is new, covers domestic violence, sexual assault, stalking for the employee or the family members, including the legal, medical, and safety needs related to those sorts of scenarios. There are some eligibility changes. It would lower the minimum employment requirements for certain leaves down to 6 months, and safe leave with 20-hour weekly average. Those are the parameters by which somebody could seek the safe leave, especially. So there's some details in there you might want to look at in more detail.
Did you say 6 months or 6 weeks for the
Having been an employee for 6 months.
6 months?
Yeah.
Perhaps what we should do is, Sophie, you want to pull up a chair so that you can be there to answer questions as well. Sophie, you want to state your name for the record, so you're,
Yes, Sophie Zagatni, I'm in the Office of Legislative Counsel.
Sophie, do you have, perhaps the best way to answer questions on substance would be for you to present the bill, and then people can ask both you guys as appropriate.
Yeah, let's do that. Yeah.
That work?
Yeah.
That would work.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I would just say Representative Hedrick's done a really good job there, providing the overview. But yeah, this bill, it is expanding access to unpaid family and parental leave with additional categories, which Representative Hedrick just mentioned. And it's also intended to eliminate barriers for LGBTQ plus families and those in non-traditional family structures, so they can also access caregiver leave as well. And then the reporting requirements as well. So in the first section of the bill, it contains some intent language, again, regarding expanding access. Section 2, as it hops around a little bit, I just thought I would just give the big overview on it.
Do you think it's worthwhile putting the bill up? I guess you don't have your computer, so let's not. Okay, go ahead. Oh, but I think, go ahead.
Okay.
And we'll see.
I think one of the biggest changes is that definition of family member. So it's a significant increase. It covers a variety of relatives and any individual with whom the employee has a significant personal bond that's like a family relationship, without requiring formal documentation of the relationship. The additional leaves, there are other additional new definitions for domestic partner, domestic violence, sexual assault, stalking, and then for the US Armed Forces. Parental leave, this expands the definition, so it now covers an employee's pregnancy, recovery from childbirth and a miscarriage, birth of a child, to care or bond with a child within the first year of the initial placement of a child for adoption or foster care for that first year. As mentioned, bereavement leave is new. That covers the death of a family member and includes leave in relation to administration and settlement of a deceased family member's estate. Safe leave is new and covers the absence from work of an employee who's the victim of domestic violence, sexual assault, or stalking. Enables them to seek medical care or counseling, recovery from injuries, to participate in safety planning for themselves or for a family member, the need to relocate or secure safe housing, meet with prosecutors or law enforcement officers, and attend hearings for an order against stalking and sexual assault. And this assumes the employee is not the perpetrator. Leave for qualifying exigency is based on federal law. So the reference in the draft bill or the bill is to the Code of Federal Regulations, but essentially it's to deal with individuals and family members if someone is going on active duty. And so it covers short notice deployment, military events, arrangements for childcare and school activities, financial and legal arrangements, attending counseling, rest and recuperation, military leave, post-deployment activities, things like arrival ceremonies, reintegration events, parental care. So things that arise out of a military member's active duty or call to active duty status. Those things are not listed in the bill, but they're incorporated by reference to the Code of Federal Regulations. For parental leave, bereavement leave, safe leave, and the qualifying exigency leave, a covered employer has to employ 10 or more individuals for an average of at least 30 hours a week. That's the same as it was before. Covered employees are those who have been employed continuously by the same employer for 1 year for an average of at least 30 hours a week. That's also consistent with what it currently is. The new bit is that for safe leave, the individual must be continuously employed by the same employer for a period of 6 months for an average of 20 hours a week. Family leave covers the serious health condition of the employee or the employee's family member. And again, that's where this expansion comes in, because by using the term family member in a much broader way, you're covering a lot more individuals. For family leave, a covered employer needs to employ 15 or more individuals for an average of at least 30 hours a week. That's the same as the current statute. And a covered employee needs to have worked continuously for the same employer for 1 year for an average of at least 30 hours a week. And that's also the same as before.
Can I just interrupt? Are members of the committee able to call this bill up?
Yeah,
I'm having trouble.
you have to look for it in the bill,
I
like
have it in the bill.
page 33.
Page 30.
Yeah, for some reason it's not linking up on the committee page, but it's in the web, in the legislatures.
It's introduced, okay.
Yes.
Is everybody able to call the bill up or have a copy?
Yes.
I was just about to ask one.
Okay, all right. And secondly, just a very basic question here. As I remember, although there was a push in the House to address paid leave last year, we didn't do it. So that means existing law is the plan that the governor put together that was a private insurance plan that was made first available to state employees and then was supposed to be expanded to others. Is this, and that's covered by a private insurance contract.
This is limited purely to unpaid leave. So what happened in the last session was there was a bigger bill that included some of these changes without the expanded definition of the family member and some of the LGBTQ plus language that's in here. But it also included paid leave. That the rerun was specifically limited to what passed the House on unpaid leave. And then it added some additional elements as requested by Representative Hedrick.
I guess I'm asking, what law are we amending?
We're amending the Parental and Family Leave Act that's in Title 21. So
And what is that act currently? What's its basic provision?
currently it's the state version of the Federal Family Medical Leave Act. So it provides additional protections above and beyond what's available under the federal act. So it's the state equivalent, but it covers more, it has different requirements, and employees are covered by the most protective statute. So sometimes it may be the Family Medical Leave Act, and sometimes it might be the Vermont Parental and Family Leave Act.
And it's unpaid,
It's unpaid leave.
unpaid leave. Whereas everything we were talking about last year was paid leave,
Right.
right?
Yep.
Okay, so this is amending unpaid. Everybody there?
Yep.
Okay, thank you. Sorry to interrupt. I just wanted to remake that clear.
So section 3 of the bill, again, this is not new, but this is just kind of goes to what Chair Mahali was referencing. Covered employees can take unpaid leave not to exceed 12 weeks for parental leave, family leave, or a qualifying exigency. And a covered employee may use up to 2 out of the 12 weeks available for bereavement leave. That's new. In addition to the 12 weeks provided, a covered employee may take up to 12 weeks of unpaid leave during any 12-month period for safe leave. And employees, and these are not new, but employees can choose to use accrued sick leave, vacation leave, or other accrued paid leave they have, because again, it's unpaid leave, but if an employee has accrued leave, they're able to use that so they can get paid while they're out. And then there are requirements regarding the employee giving the employer a reasonable notice. And again, there's, as soon as practicable, but 6 weeks in the case of an adoption or birth of a child.
Just a second. Elizabeth, you have a question?
Since this is, just as a point of clarification, since this is an extension of the federal FMLA, I just want to be absolutely sure that it includes job security.
It does. So this is also not new. The current law provides job protection. So on returning from leave, an employee is to be offered the same or comparable job at the same level or compensation, employment benefits, seniority, or any other term or condition of employment that existed on the day the leave began. And that's already in the current law.
Thank you.
I mean, there are some exceptions. Again, if the employee had already said, by the way, I'm quitting, or, you know, you're being laid off before they go out on the leave, obviously that, that changes things. But generally speaking, the whole purpose of the act is really to provide that job protection. The other elements are generally, you know, consistent with what we currently have. The other new piece is in section 6, which is the reporting requirement. And this would require the Commissioner of Labor to adopt rules requiring employers to track and report on the usage rate of the leave taken and listing out what needs to be reported. So aggregated data on leave usage rates by all employees, including non-traditional family structures, LGBTQ plus families, and chosen family relationships. And then the goal is to have the Commissioner of Labor identify barriers and challenges that employees may have experienced in trying to access this leave. And then for the Commissioner to compile data from the reports and use the information to identify any structural barriers in accessing leave and making recommendations to improve access and reduce equity gaps.
Questions? By the committee? Yes, Ashley.
I have a few. So first, let me just say, I really appreciate that miscarriage is in this bill. It was something that I definitely was very vocal about 2 years ago. Can we look at bereavement leave? How many states, I have an idea, have bereavement leave within their statutes?
I don't know the number off the top of my head. I'd be happy to look into that. Under this, it would be a maximum of 2 weeks for bereavement leave out of the 12 weeks that are available.
Okay.
And it also has a, it's to occur within 1 year after the family member's death, but it also allows for leave to deal with the administration or settlement of the deceased family member's estate, which may go beyond the 1 year.
So,
Quick Google search lists 5 as of
okay,
December.
I was guessing 7,
20.
so.
It might have, this is December 23.
Okay, perfect, thank you. So the reason I'm looking at that is the leave is taken in relation to the administration of settlement of the deceased family member's estate may occur more than 1 year after the family member's death. I'm asking from an employer's point of view. My background is in human resources, specifically in benefits and leave. Say I, as an employee, I was a parent, I've been with an employer for 3 years, I can take leave, granted in this, but my family moves and I start another employee with another employer. Which employer?
You wouldn't be if you changed employment, you wouldn't be continuously employed by that employer, so you wouldn't be eligible for bereavement
You
leave
can't
for the
take
new
it.
employer.
Okay, so then if it's longer than a year, so say 2 years after, I'm still with this new employer, can I take leave for?
I see what you're asking, like the death occurred while you were at the previous employer.
Yeah.
I believe that once you've met, you're now a covered employee, you've been with this new employer long enough, you would still be eligible to take the leave, given the language here, leave taken in relation to the administration or settlement of the deceased family member's estate may occur more than 1 year after the family member's death.
Okay.
Unless we wrote in, right? Something that says unless employment ends.
Right.
Yeah, but you could still be, I mean, I know for a fact that you could still be settling your parents' estate 5 years later.
Oh, yeah, for sure. I'm just saying that the way it's worded leaves it open to the next employer who you're at for longer than a year to have to give you that benefit, even though it's happened earlier. So I'm saying unless we worded it something like, you know, until employment ends, you know, out, it would.
I'm just saying that just because the event took place 3 years ago, doesn't mean that you as an executor still don't have the legal obligation of going to court and, you know, taking time off from work to
Yeah, you're saying we shouldn't write in something that says
Right.
employment ends. I'm just clarifying that.
I just wanted
Currently,
to
the language is
Make
allowed.
sure I understood the intent behind there. Thank you.
Yes,
I was just wondering if you could speak a little bit more about the employers. You were saying that they're recording the things that happen under their employees.
Yeah, so there was interest in having some way of measuring this and seeing the impact, like are more people able to access unpaid leave because of the changes? But the Commissioner of Labor is not going to know. I mean, right now, usage of unpaid leave does not go through the Commissioner of Labor. So the bill proposes having the employers report to the Commissioner of Labor the usage that employees are using to take this leave.
So for example, they might just report that, someone took 3 months off because they had a baby. Like that would be it. Or they took,
So what's in the bill is for the Commissioner of Labor to adopt rules on, let the Department of Labor figure out the rules around that, sort of how they would go about gathering the data. The bill doesn't specify exactly how that will be done, but the goal is to make sure that there's some way to track usage. And again, I don't want to speak for
And
you.
there are certainly, there are currently in place some, it prohibits disclosure of sensitive information around some of the leave, especially around the safety stuff. Go ahead.
yes, very.
Joe.
Just for clarification, for parental leave, if someone leaves to have a baby and is out 3 months, it's unpaid. Can they file for unemployment because they're not working for those 3 months? I don't know anybody today who can take unpaid leave for 3 months. I just,
Yeah, I don't believe so, because they're still effectively employed. They're not able to search for work, right? If they're taking leave to care for an infant, they're not in a position where they're looking for work. And one of the requirements for unemployment is that you're available to work. So under the current law, and this doesn't change it in this bill, if an employee has accrued paid leave, they could access that leave to help them during that time. But this is an unpaid leave act.
I was going to add, to be clear, I'm more than willing to have that conversation with you about expanding paid leave. That's not what this bill tries, that's not what this bill is trying to do.
I
It's trying
understand
to-
that because we've had that conversation in this committee for a number of years, and we're one of 2 countries that doesn't offer it. And especially in today's economy, I just don't know. We took testimony from a young woman that planned the birth of her child over a long weekend so she could get back to work and not lose her job, and that's wrong. So,
So this bill, and again, the current law is really, it's around job protection, so that you're not losing your job because you have to, step away from work to have a baby.
Joe, did you have a question?
Yeah, just to go, so this is, I know this is strictly for unpaid leave. We don't reference any of these statutes anywhere else, so that we're changing a reference statute for unintendedly. It points to the definition from the statute here is how we're defining something, right?
So the definitions apply to this particular subchapter of the, right.
Okay.
Go ahead.
I just wanted to give the committee some clarification. Normally, when you're looking at FMLA or PFMLA, which is parental leave, it's 12 weeks of unpaid leave. It's the mechanism to save your job and job protection. Some employers, definitely not all, I wouldn't even go so far to say a majority of employers offer STD, short-term disability, in which if they do, that is a mechanism to receive payment on leave. And that's normally done by a third-party benefit provider. So you can use them congruently together, but you're not getting paid through the 12 weeks.
You have,
You don't have to use the first one first, like the disability first and then go to FMLA?
Some disabilities might ask, like some programs and plans might be written that way. A majority of them aren't. A majority of them are, you can use STD at the same time. And a lot of times, let's use having a baby for an example. It's a physician will pretty much say, I think it's like 6 to 8 weeks if it's vaginal. It might be longer if it's a C-section. And then if you have like postpartum depression and anxiety, they might add longer depending on when your plan is. So your STD might cover you, but your FMLA might not. So your employer might keep your job, but, or, you know, keep a position open for you for when you return. It's all kind of a moving target.
you had a question and then get,
Yeah, thanks. Obviously for returning members, was a lot of on our plate for many months, with paid leave, last session. And I really do appreciate, the bereavement aspect. You know, I'm someone who lost both my parents and is someone who's had to go through that, by myself. And, you know, my mom, when my dad passed away when I was very young, had to also deal with that. So I appreciate that being brought into the conversation as something, and as Rep. Burrows noted, you know, I spent, you know, while I was here, many hours dealing with the estate and other things, and it was very hard. So I do appreciate that being included into the conversation and that you brought that forward to us. I think it's an important piece that often goes unlooked.
thank you. Any other questions? Yes, Gail.
So besides the benefit of, what did you call it? Disability and securing the job, what are the other benefits for unpaid leave?
That's at the heart of this, right? Is protecting your job during unpaid leave, and it expands, again, it expands the definitions of what qualifies for unpaid leave, and it expands the definition for who can access unpaid leave. And let me just add this to that. So, and maybe this is my bigger point that I want to make. This is about expanding our capacity as a state, as a society, capacity for care, right? And I am not a big fan of doing what if legislation, meaning if we do this, what if, right? Because there are a gazillion what if. I do want to encourage the committee to consider the benefits of expanding what constitutes who can take this sort of leave. And you're going to get into conversations about that, right? And for me, this goes well beyond the LGBTQ plus protections that are stated. I think of like Home Share Vermont relationships. And if you have not met Home Share Vermont, I'm sure they'll be here throughout the session. Talk to them and hear the stories, right? So if I'm an aging Vermonter living alone in my house and I have capacity to provide housing for somebody who's looking for housing, who can maybe help me with cooking or gardening or whatever, right? The relationships that develop in that sort of environment are family-like, right? That's what I think of when I think about expanding who has access to protecting their jobs when they're caring for somebody who has become a family member. Or I think about the 17-year-old kid who has had to leave his house for domestic violence reasons, and that person finds his chosen family, and that chosen family develops and expands and blossoms to the point where they're family-like. That's what I think about when I think about who should have access to unpaid leave for a variety of reasons. That's kind of what's in it for me. That's the heart of this bill for me. I think we have to modernize and expand beyond the very limits, the narrow limits that are in place right now about who gets protected for unpaid leave.
We have two witnesses, I think, who are with us. And my question is, can we move to hear those two witnesses? Or do you have more questions of these individuals? Sophie, are you able to stay?
Say, yes.
So we will be able to, Sophie is sworn in and we can.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Great conversation.
Thank you, Representative Federici.
You. Elizabeth, did you?
I just wanted to say thank you
Yeah.
for bringing.
Right, so our next witness. We just called, so. Is Johanna here?
I do not see it. She was in the building earlier.
Megan? Megan Sullivan is Vice President of Government Affairs for the Vermont Chamber. Megan, welcome. Can you guys see if you can ruffle up Johanna? Thank you. Megan, were you present when we all introduced ourselves?
I was present for most of it. But I may have to remind you, so that's okay.
Why don't we go ahead with your testimony then?
Okay, Megan Sullivan, Vice President of Government Affairs for the Vermont Chamber of Commerce. Thank you, Mr. Chair, for having me. I appreciate the opportunity to be here today. I am coming back tomorrow to do a bigger introduction as to who the Vermont Chamber is. So when you see me, you'll know more about that. But just a quick overview, the Vermont Chamber is a statewide business organization. We're the largest business organization in the state. We have members in every industry, in every corner of the state, and our work largely focuses on advocacy. We also do education and provide resources for our members. We're different than, regional and local chambers. We're different than the national chamber, but it can be confusing. We'll talk, I'm sure, more about that tomorrow. I appreciate the opportunity for those of you who saw me last year, you know, so. Appreciate the opportunity to come in and speak with you all about this bill. We certainly were present for conversations around H66, the paid family leave bill. And so some of these same definitions were up and, were discussed at that point in time. We are supportive of a lot of the intent of this bill, some of the things that this bill does. I think it's also important while we're talking about the intent of the bill that we also talk about and think about in consideration of the details, some of the other economic realities that the businesses in the state are facing. There are currently 2 job openings for every job seeker. So, I'm sure as folks have read their local newspaper or try to go to their favorite restaurant, businesses are struggling with our workforce challenges in the state. And some are closing because they just can't find the staff they need to operate. And it creates a lot of challenge in the economic world of a business as they're trying to figure out how to operate with fewer workers than they need. When we're talking about leave policies, I think in the broader conversation, we also need to be thinking about when an employee goes on an extended leave, it can be exceptionally challenging, not even to think about a permanent replacement if somebody leaves permanently, but if you have to find a temporary worker, right? So there is an economic cost in having to find someone to fill that work in a temporary basis. But the likelihood of being able to find that person to work for a few months can be really challenging. Not to say that that is a leading factor we need to think about, but I do ask that the committee think about those things as well when we're talking about sort of the size and scope that we're looking at here. I do think in this current environment, businesses have found flexibility in determining some benefits to be helpful. Not all workforces want the same thing. We do know that businesses have been excited in taking up the Hartford medical leave insurance program that you were speaking about earlier. It would probably be worth having them in to talk about how things are going in the state around that program. I know we at the chamber, found it to be very cost-effective way of offering benefits to employees.
Is it now available to employees who are
yeah.
not in the state?
As of employers, it's available to all employers in the state.
Thank you.
Yeah, that started July 1
Yeah, 24.
of 24. And I think as most employers do their benefits packaging towards the end of the year, certainly that, I think between those two timelines, it's a good time to get an update.
Sorry, I'm trying to get confirmation, but I believe this past summer, it was supposed to allow individuals and like Joe Schmo off the street.
Joe needs his leave, so.
The only name I could think of. I'm trying to get confirmation on that.
Yeah.
But I believe that anyone who is interested in some sort of insurance should be able to take part in that program as well.
So when there is opportunity for flexibility and saying this is what is, can be most beneficial to my workforce, that can be advantageous for a business to, especially in this market where there are such a need for workers to really figure out what is the package that will help me best attract workers to my workforce. So given sort of that background setting, happy to sort of talk as I've read through the bill, some of the questions or concerns that we have in the details. It sounds like you all have it up in front of you. I may be able to share my screen if it's not, I don't know if you can just share if the bill is posted or if I need to, I'm just looking at the bill.
Yeah, it works best if you share your screen so that you can scroll.
Well, golly, you say it works best, but. Okay. Do you want me to try and share or should I just?
Yeah, I think it would be good
Okay,
if you can. If you
well,
can.
we're gonna
We
find
can
it.
share your screen, but then we have to be your Vanna White, as they used to say.
Oh, I've always wanted to go Vanna White, so that could be for the best. Sorry, I'm just trying to find the Zoom link.
Oh, yeah. Don't be shy. What?
Don't bring them this way.
Yeah, they're the best.
They really are. Ever.
Okay.
Twist there.
Oh. Should I send them that way?
Is it not working?
I'll send you a new one.
I got the link. I think they're letting you know that I'm here. Okay.
That's a good question.
Yes.
When you talk about hiring of temporary workers and the economic cost of that,
Yeah.
I think in some cases, sometimes this leave, which is, provided by federal law, reinforced by Vermont law, because
That is the least of our technical difficulties. I think we're in good shape.
because some of those scenarios that protect a worker from losing their job are so dire that they have to leave no matter what. It would be great if their job was there, but they don't necessarily have a choice in the matter. Has your office done any analysis of the cost of replacing an employee such as that versus hiring? Whether it's an equal cost or whether it costs more to onboard a new employee altogether versus hiring a temporary worker?
I think it certainly costs more to onboard someone altogether over the long run. I mean, if you bring on a temporary worker that needs training, they're gonna have to be trained as much as a new employee would have to be trained. So there's cost involved there. I think,
I just.
or
mean
a
if there's
similar cost there of the onboarding process, whether it's someone you're bringing in for 3 months or someone you're bringing in permanently, if you need them to do a specific skill job, there is a cost to that onboarding, which is why we have some great workforce development programs in the state to try and help with those costs. And so I think employers that I speak with are trying their best to hold on to the workforce that they have, right? And so if someone in that flexibility, if someone needs to take leave, working with them to try and make sure they can come back. Obviously, there are exceptions for everything of how those relationships work. But there is huge turnover in the workforce out there, and it is very expensive to sort of train someone, have them leave, have to bring someone on, train them again for the same position.
Yeah,
And leave.
well, I'm asking to hold those two scenarios side by side. One in which an employee has to leave no matter what, even if it means them quitting their job. Versus, and the cost of now having to hire, the hiring cost plus the onboarding cost versus the cost. Has your office compared the cost of that with the cost of hiring a temporary worker to fill the temporary absence?
The temporary worker would also need to have the skills to do that position, though.
Yeah.
So either way, you have to do that onboarding skill training for either a temporary worker or a new permanent worker. It's just
Yeah.
whether one is doing that training with the intention of you're only going to be here for 2 months, 3 months,
Right.
or not. So that, I guess that training period, regardless of who's in it, has a similar expense.
Right. And I guess all I'm asking is whether
Right.
your office has compared those two costs.
We've not done like a research into a temporary worker for 3 months versus a long-term worker. But my experience would tell me that both need to be trained to do a skilled position.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. All right, and then Tom.
Yeah, so I guess I just, like, I feel like we're taking on a much bigger question than the one that the bill itself presents, which I'm finding really helpful as a newbie on this committee. But I also feel like we're not trying to, we're speaking specifically about how we define family. And I guess I would like to hear from you whether
Yes.
just
That-
that
For
wording
those,
is.
you're right, so there's a lot to this bill. And so now that I am on, how do I share will be the next.
Meanwhile, I'll tell you what,
And
she's about to, I think, start going through.
Start going through.
And actually give us detail. Tom, did you have a general question before we?
The general question is whether or not we have any kind of labor marketplace information, how long it takes a business to fill a full-time position versus how long it might take them to find somebody who actually wants
A temporary job.
position.
I would,
It seems much harder to fill.
a temporary position, right, I mean, I would expect if you were to talk to some of our temp agencies, they would mention that it is very challenging, but that's, I would recommend bringing in SHRM or one of our HR organizations in the state, as well as Department of Labor, sort of talk about what those challenges more broadly are.
Yes.
Thank you. I have a question regarding the temporary worker versus the permanent worker. For the temporary worker, the company doesn't pay benefits for the temporary worker, does it?
It depends on the structure. So if a temporary worker is coming from a temp agency, then they are employed by the agency.
Right.
But an employer can bring on a temporary worker that is an employee, that may not be eligible for benefits just because of the
Because
length
they're
of the
temporary.
period that they're there. But employees are also not eligible for the benefits we're talking about under this bill. Again, it's up to the employer, but under the state federal mandate, it's a year that you're employed for a year when you become eligible for FMLA.
Point of information, I think we have some answer to your question here yet.
Oh, okay.
So if somebody, if you're going through a temp agency or employed by a temp agency, oftentimes they do have benefits that the temp agency provides to them. So as an employer, you're paying not only their rate, it's very rarely like a salary, it's usually an hourly rate plus a premium on top. And that really depends on the agency and what that premium is. Some agencies allow you to say, okay, you're gonna get stuck, I don't want to say stuck, but you'll have this length of time that you can reassess after. Right, you can cut it in half, but you still owe this. It like really depends on the structure. But usually with a temp agency, there is a premium in addition to the rate. So you are paying a higher rate for that employee.
And I know it depends on the job, but I did know in some instances where there was cross-training amongst employees so that if someone is out, people pitched in. You know, if someone was
Yeah.
out for 3 months,
So
people
that can be
pitched in.
challenging to ask, right, if you.
Some people might want to work.
They might want
extra.
to, right, and that's again where that flexibility comes in, but there can be challenges of asking employees to take on extra work for extended periods of time. You know, help pitching in for a short period of time, but saying for the next 3 months, you're gonna be doing a job now. Can be a challenging request.
Why don't
Okay.
you go ahead?
Jumping into
Yeah,
some of our
Focus in on,
Yeah.
I'm just thinking, we have
page 4.
one more witness
Yeah.
and we have, I would say, maybe you've got 10 minutes.
Okay. Page 4, definition of employee. So for the most part, the definition of an employee is well-established 30 hours per week for someone who's been an employee for a year. And the change for safe leave, that it's for 6 months and 20 hours. Just say that when we add complexity, it can add a lot of confusion for employers. So to know like, okay, I am an employer because I have 15 employees who work 30 hours and my employees who are eligible work 30 hours for a year, except for safe leave, which is 20 hours for 6 months. It just adds a level of complexity that, you know, especially if we're talking about businesses that are on more of the side of the 10 or 15 employees. So would ask the committee to consider just marrying those up more closely, so that it's, you know, safe leave is the same for as an employee, as defined in the other types of leave. To reduce that complexity of folks trying to understand, am I in, am I out, are my employees in, are my employees out, which employees are in, as they're trying to navigate and make sure they're following along with the law. Next.
You know, one thing I know is going to be helpful is if after you testified, if you could provide us language that, literal language change that you think we should make.
Okay.
Thank you.
I will say I'm not a lawyer, but they want on TV right now.
Get to it.
Yes, yeah, happy to.
And then we'll have our lawyer work on it. Thank you.
Have your lawyer call our lawyer.
Our next reflection is on page 5 at the bottom. You know, I think a lot of the added definitions of family, we are very supportive of, reflecting, I don't even want to call them modern because families have always been diverse and just the time to recognize that is important. where we have questions is in E. While I understand the intent of E, I think an employer or an HR director that is trying to understand when someone comes to them and says, I need leave because someone that I consider family is in a situation, that can be challenging, especially when you can't ask for any type of evidence to support that relationship. You know, I think in a home share situation, you know, you can show evidence that you lived with a certain person, almost like the domestic partner definition for 6 months. But if you can't request any evidence or legal documentation that shows that there is any connection between you and this person, it becomes really challenging for an employer or an HR director to make determinations of, you know, if something is legitimate, if this really is someone that is like family. So again, understand the intent, but worry about what the implications could actually be in the workplace. On bereavement leave,
Where,
sorry, page 10. Oh, no. Okay, I'm gonna be really quick. My other testimony is on. Bereavement leave, just look at, I would ask the committee to look at what the other states are that have adopted a bereavement leave. My quick read is that this is more expensive than what other states have done. So if we're going to include bereavement leave, looking at, can we align with what's already happening in other states around bereavement leave?
You're saying the length of time?
The length of time, some businesses, you know, some states, it's a much larger, you know, sort of recognizing that larger businesses have more capacity to, if one person is gone, it's not a tenth of your workforce that's gone. So some states have, you know, it's, if you have 50 employees or more, then this is a requirement. But the length of time is also be different than what I have seen, and maybe Ledge Council can do some additional look at that. And then the last piece I wanted to bring up is on the reporting.
where are you?
The last page 16, the bottom of 15, top of 16. This I think feels a little gray. So aggregated data on leave usage rates by all employees, including those in non-traditional family structures. So if I'm an employer and my employee comes up to me and says, I need to take medical leave because my spouse is having a procedure. If I have responsibilities for reporting to the state, do I need to now ask my employee, I need to know your spouse's gender and sexual orientation? That feels like something that we should not be requiring employers to find out. Again, understand the intent of trying to make sure that as we have expanded definitions, that these family structures are able to access. But I think the work is expanding those definitions and putting it into law. And if documentation is required, then that documentation will show that you're a grandparent, or you have, just going through the expanded definitions, that you meet that. But I think specifically asking employers to report on non-traditional family structures is asking employers to get involved in a way that we have said we don't want employers to get involved in. So sort of that's a question. Also, barriers or challenges reported by employees. It's unclear, are all employees supposed to submit something to DOL, or employers supposed to do a survey of their employees to get information on if they've seen barriers or challenges? Is this just DOL collecting this from people calling in? And then DOL compiling the data from the reports submitted by employers and using information to identify structural barriers. Is this a report that's being sent to the legislature? Are they supposed to make policy recommendations? I don't know what the rules are around asking the administration to make. Anyways, what is the goal of the report? Who is it supposed to go to? What is, I think the reporting section I have just needs clarification.
Yeah, I appreciate those flags, if you will. Particularly the last one, because that does seem counterintuitive to being, you know, I am a co-sponsor of this bill because I believe we need to have this conversation. And, you know, that's what the committee work is for. And so I do think that the reporting mechanism does sound troubling to me, counterintuitive to the point of this is to make it inclusive to more people and to then have employers, you know, people need to also self-identify. It's not really the place of an employer to have to then suss out that information because we're telling them to. So that is concerning for sure. And I'm glad that you raised that point. And I would also like to make clear intention of if we do decide to take up this bill and do talk about the reporting mechanism, where making it clearer who is reporting it. So that is another flag that I think was important and raised. But I again, co-sponsor, support the conversation. So I'm glad that we're having that and appreciate you pointing that out.
Joe?
Yeah, on that same vein, just another aspect of that is, I mean, we're a state of small employers.
Yeah.
Just the excess paperwork we're adding into, I know if I were to go to my employer and say my father passed away, there's not going to be any conversation. There's going to be, yeah, take some time off. Then to have to go, you know, I need a week off. Then to have to go and file paperwork and do all this when there's no problem at all, whether I have leave or I'm taking leave for whatever. Now I have to go through this reporting process and be left for this reason. It seems excessive for what we're trying to get at.
I mean, reporting does add a layer of challenge. And then what is the enforcement mechanism if folks are not sending in this new report that they're being required to do? What is the cost to DOL to implement this and see it through? So again, those are sort of our quick flags on this. I think there are a lot of folks who would need to weigh in on this, especially if we're talking essential services and what is the impact of, you know, I think getting to some of those bigger questions of, you know, can you find temporary workers? What is the cost? And, you know, certainly what we are hearing from folks is the biggest challenge for employees in Vermont is housing. And so we are looking forward to working with this committee on spending a lot of time on housing.
I look forward to your testimony tomorrow.
Yeah, you'll see me again. Okay.
Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
And I think we should move at this point to our next witness.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Is Johanna here?
Hi.
Please have a seat. Johanna de Grafenried.
That's right. Yes.
It's so have a seat. And were you in the room when we introduced ourselves? Do you know? No.
I was not. Unfortunately, your lovely committee assistant had me scheduled for 1:45, so I can't whatever for that.
Would you start us off?
I certainly can. Emily Krasnow, South Burlington, Chittenden 9.
Sadia Lamont, Lamoille, Washington District, Morristown, Elmore, Worcester, Woodbury, and a small part of Stowe.
Hi, I'm Elizabeth Burrows and I represent Windsor 1, which is Heartland, West Windsor.
I'm Representative Mary Howard and I represent Rutland District 6.
Gail Pezzo, I represent Chittenden 20, Colchester.
I'm Debbie Dolgan. I represent St. Johnsbury, Kirby, and Concord.
Hey, Tom Charlton, Grafton, Athens, Chesterton, and Wyndham.
I'm Leonora Dodge from Essex Town in the city of Essex Junction.
Ashley Barley, Fairfax, Georgia. Lovely to meet you.
So you want to introduce yourself to our witness since your chair is right there at this moment.
Joseph Parsons, Newbury Thompson, Groton.
Nice to meet you.
Did you already?
Oh,
yes, you did. So it's me. I'm Mark Mahaly, by Callis, Plainfield, and Marshfield. Thank you. And take it away.
Wonderful.
Introduce yourself and you're for the record.
Yes, sir. My name is Johanna de Grafenried. I represent Vermont Businesses for Social Responsibility as their public policy manager. VBSR has been in existence for over 30 years, ensuring that businesses can be used as a force for good here in Vermont. We're really pleased to be able to speak with you today on H33, an expansion of the Paid Family Medical Leave Act. I want to be clear, I'm going to speak to the intent of the bill. Mary Sullivan, I think Ms. Sullivan, just right before me, was kind enough to speak to some more of the specifics of how the bill might be implemented. And we look forward to seeing future versions of the bill where we might comment on some of those specifics, but we wanted to stay high level to the intent of the bill and make sure that our perspective was heard from that. I'm going to read a brief statement and then answer questions. Committee members, thank you for inviting me to speak on House Bill 33, an act relating to expanding employees' access to unpaid leave. Again, my name is Johanna de Grafenried, and I represent the nearly 600 members of Vermont Businesses for Social Responsibility, or VBSR. Our members include small and large businesses ranging across all economic sectors in Vermont. We're in all 14 counties of Vermont. For years, VBSR has supported comprehensive universal paid family and medical leave for all Vermonters. H33 is a pragmatic step to equitably expanding paid family and medical leave, and we support the passage of this legislation into law as you all continue to thoughtfully discuss it. There are several aspects of H33 which I would like to address in my testimony today. The first is the importance of expanding paid family and medical leave to be inclusive of LGBTQIA employees in Vermont. I want to note that 12 states have expanded their paid family and medical leave to better include LGBTQIA employees and their families, including Connecticut, Maine, New York, and Massachusetts. These states have expanded their paid family and medical leave programs to cover LGBTQIA individuals, even if those couples are not legally married specifically. And Ledge Council may have gone over this with you all already. With 1,900 employees identifying as LGBTQIA in Vermont as of 2020, according to the Williams Institute at UCLA, the proposed coverage expansion of H33 is a crucial step towards addressing the paid family and medical leave needs of working LGBTQIA Vermonters, their children, family members, and partners. The second item in the bill, which VBSR strongly supports, is the inclusion of miscarriages being explicitly named as a medical event covered by paid family and medical leave. Currently, miscarriages, as I understand it, covered only if it requires inpatient hospitalization or, quote, a regimen of continuing treatment under supervision of a healthcare provider. According to the fact sheet provided by the state of Vermont on our paid family and medical leave policy, continuing regimen of treatment is defined as, quote, a regimen of continuing treatment, for example, course of prescription medication, e.g. an antibiotic, or therapy requiring special equipment to resolve or alleviate the health condition. A regimen of treatment does not include the taking of over-the-counter medications such as aspirin, antihistamines or salves, bed rest, drinking fluids, or exercise, or any similar activities that can be initiated without a visit to your healthcare provider. While prescriptions may be needed to resolve the healthcare issues relating to a miscarriage, this is not always the case. Similarly, while in some instances it may be medically necessary for an individual to be admitted overnight into the hospital after a miscarriage, this is very often not the case. It is not common practice for individuals experiencing a miscarriage to be admitted to the hospital. The way our paid family and medical leave law is currently written can possibly leave employees experiencing a miscarriage uncovered by paid family and medical leave, despite needing several days to recover from the medical event. Due to the significant nature of the health event, VBSR supports employees having explicit paid family and medical leave coverage in the instance of miscarriage, regardless of if admittance to the hospital or a regimen of continuing treatment is required. Lastly, VBSR strongly supports the expansion of our paid family and medical leave policy to include paid leave for survivors of intimate partner violence, sexual assault, and stalking, aka safe leave. According to the Women's Bureau at the U.S. Department of Labor, As of April 2024, 6 of the 13 paid family and parental leave laws permit employees to take leave to address the needs of survivors of domestic violence, sexual assault, or stalking. Included in the 6 states, which include safe leave in their paid family and medical leave policy, Maine is one, to note someone else in our region who's an equally rural state. Often survivors of stalking and violence need time to seek mental or medical health care, relocating to a safer home, going to court, or finding support services. According to national survey data, 15.9 million US women, approximately 12.7%, and 6.7 US men, approximately 5.7%, have missed at least one day of work due to an intimate partner violence over their lifetime. Ensuring that this time is paid and that employees' jobs are protected while seeking services is crucial for supporting survivors in need of safe leave in Vermont. I also want to leave you all with some information on the benefits to employers and to the economy when employees are covered under robust paid family and medical leave policies. Caregiving is the bedrock of Vermont's economy, and it significantly impacts our business's bottom line. Employees often face the tough choice of leaving their jobs for caregiving duties and medical needs, while employers bear the high financial and cultural costs associated with employee turnover, as we've heard from other testimony. This economic dynamic has a pronounced impact on gender equity in the state, as a majority of those leaving their careers to provide care are women. In Vermont, there's a notable 6% labor force participation gap between men and women, and expanding our paid family and medical leave policy will not only aid in addressing the gender gap in the workforce, but ultimately expand the number of employees available for hire during our state's workforce shortage, ensuring that folks can keep their jobs and ensuring that we can support folks to stay and work when needed for short-term or long-term leave is always helpful for preventing turnover and for ensuring that our workforce is protected. A lack of paid safe leave also harms businesses and the economy because reduced productivity and the cost of increased turnover, as I just mentioned. The National Institute of Health published a 2017 study estimating that the American economy loses approximately $137.8 billion in short-term productivity due to gender-based violence and harassment. Providing for employees and their families as they seek medical and legal resources after instances of violence and stalking promotes job security and Vermont's economy. Additionally, Vermont has an aging population, and workers need resources to be able to care for themselves and aging Vermonters. Right now, more than 1 in 4 Vermont workers are 55 and older, and within the next 20 years, the portion of Vermont's population age 65 and older is expected to grow by more than a quarter. Family caregivers are already spending on average a quarter, 26% of their income on caregiving activities. However, a universal paid family and leave program would add about 13,000 family caregivers to Vermont's workforce by 2030, a telling figure given Vermont's current workforce shortage. Again, VBSR has been a strong supporter of universal and robust paid family and medical leave. We always like to state that whenever coming in on testimony, while recognizing that this bill is a specific expansion of coverage. Vermont Businesses for Social Responsibility, for the reasons I've listed in my testimony, as well as the countless ethical and economic arguments in favor of a larger, robust, universal paid family and medical leave program, supports the passage of H33 into law as it continues to be discussed. We hope that the legislature will continue to expand this crucial program for all working Vermonters and their families. And this bill is a thoughtful and important next step in making our paid family and medical leave policy more equitable, fair, and inclusive. I want to thank you all for your time and for inviting me to speak on behalf of VBSR and our members today on this legislation, as you can see.
Thank you very much. Any final questions from the committee?
Thank you.
Thank you for coming. Appreciate it a lot.
Certainly. Thank you all so much for having me. I really appreciate it. We will also be in here speaking about housing and many other issues, so it's a pleasure to meet the committee. And I certainly tend to come exactly when I'm scheduled, so if you need me at a different time, don't hesitate to let me know because I'm popping around committees just like honey.
Thank you.
So thank you all so much for your time today. I really appreciate it.
Committee, let's take a 5-minute break and then we will proceed your H38.